all the war stuff, then you need to program in non-war stuff. Here is another layer to think about when it comes to healing. And boil down, what healing is healing where the character has been programmed in these very intense reactions, or reactions that should not be cookie cutter in a very intense manner. That's basically like healing boiled down. It's reprogramming the loop or the character reel that goes through the mind. And I've talked about it many, many times. There's energy going up through your spine into your mind, which is in your brain, or at the same time and place simultaneously, but two different entities. So let's look at this with the brain is grown from matter that comes up from the ground, is put in the body, then grown in there. But there is an operating mechanism that we cannot see and we cannot perceive with this body, if that makes sense. Only the awareness can perceive backwards into this. So you have two different dimensional entities in the same place, and you are controlling those. So you've heard of the mind and you've heard of the brain. Well, the mind is the ethereal part or the spiritual part, or on that plane of existence, if that makes sense. So you have that. So now we got to look at healing at a new level. Okay, so our character reel is not just something that our brain does. Our body does the impulses. So energy comes up, goes to a marker in the brain that says, move this hand, move this leg, pick this pencil up, look this way, make these sounds. Just there's a ton of different orders or instructions that come from the brain, and they're electrical impulses, and they can be tied in conjunction with themselves to respond to a need that's playing on the reel from the character, which is in the mind, the character reel. And that is activated in the brain. So there's a certain code or frequency that identifies those two with each of them. So when this one plays, it knows that I go here, activate this. So that's what a marker is and how it gets activated in the brain off of your character reel, which is in your mind. So looking at it from like the outside in, going down to all the layers, with healing, not only do you need to be feeding the brain properly and working on overriding these pre-programmed responses, and the reason why you're feeding the brain well and taking nutrients is as you're creating new habits, you're creating new neural pathways, and the brain needs the material to grow that stuff, to shift and move in there and make sure those neural pathways that are being created are built with the correct building blocks. Because check this out. Most likely, if you've not had a proper diet, those building blocks that are being used for the neural networks in your brain are not built very well. Because maybe for a long period of time, you're going through an extreme circumstance and the building blocks that you were getting did not have the nutrients that the brain needs to rebuild or build at its most highest capacity, if that makes sense. So let's say you go down to Indonesia, not to be rude or anything, I've never been there, and you cut down some trees and you make a bridge with rope. Well, what if you go to New York or some city where somebody like Elon Musk lives, and he can basically say, here's as much money as you want to build this bridge I want. Then you can go get all the proper nutrients. So now if you're at a period of time when you can give it all the proper nutrients and you're working on healing, you can start basically rebuilding the brain in specific areas. But anyway, the old stuff that was not built very well will fade away faster as the new ones are built with proper nutrients. Energy prefers to flow and go where it is like most applicable, if that makes sense. So I just had a thought in my brain. If I had talked to most people about energy like this, I don't know how well it's received. So it operates better when it's being built with the best material. So when you're doing healing, you need to be focused on feeding the brain properly, because it is the level right below the ethereal, I'm probably saying that wrong, or the spiritual level of the mind, which you need to get into programming the real in there, which your character reel plays on or plays off of. And as you do that, because I've talked about that already, how you lift the needle off and you put in the new programming that you've been creating, and you can program in those new strips in the character reel to do what you want them to do. Like, you become the programmer. So here, I'm getting off on some rabbit trails. So here, when you get, you're working on healing, basically in the brain and the mind. And so you want to move those markers to where they need to go in a healthy way, and then change the programming on the reel that's being played. So, and when you do that, it's just a healthy conjunction. I think it's conjunction or a joint like operation task force of like, we're operating on the spiritual, energetic level, and we're operating on the 3D level. So your healing like just gets hyper advanced there, because you're going in like a surgeon now. Not just like, when I start to get mad, I'm going to call my buddy. You know? No, I have a really solid operating plan laid out. I have the mechanics of how this stuff works. And then I'm getting the proper supplies for this operation, which are basically nutrients and creating the program and doing the writing out of your new character. Because if you want to not be playing all the war stuff, then you need to program in non-war stuff. It's like, okay, this is how the character reel reads. Because on a character reel, I've talked about, there's different layers of data being laid in there. And feeling is a whole subject line that's laid in there, or layer of programming in that reel. So if you have a layer of programming for months that comes up every year of stress, worry, scared, like camaraderie, all those feelings of like, oh, everything's around, those are layers of programming that get read every year. And they are separate layers from the way your body works. There's a different level of the programming where it's, this is how the body works. This is what the mouth says. This is how we feel during this entire stretch of time. And programming that out takes specific isolation of what are those feelings in this period of time. So you can actually get rid of the desire of like, oh, I miss everybody and the camaraderie, and just miss it, because that was a layer of programming in the character reel. So if in your character sheet, you plan out that I'm going to feel fulfilled, and I'm going to be very focused on my tasks, and I'm going to be self-validating, and I'm very glad that I can depend on myself. If you put a statement like that in your character sheet and you started believing that, that's a whole layer of programming in your character of a feeling of confidence and solidity, and not the need for other people being around you that make you feel safe. That's a piece of programming that needs to be just changed also. It's not changing who you are, it's changing this sub-dialogue, which is basically a feeling that plays on the character reel. So healing has so many different layers that you can specifically target and work on. Not just like a smattering of like, let's say there's a big barn and you're like, you know what, there's a bucket of treasure in that barn, and you get a wrecking ball and you just smash it down. Yes, you'll get to it, but you're going to have a lot of problems to get through. But if you go up to it and you're like, I'm going to get my crowbar, I'm going to get a flashlight, I'm going to get a shovel and a pick. And you enter the barn that way, and you go right to that bucket of treasure. And then what you can do is when you have what you're after, you just burn your obstacle down because it's no longer needed. And it's a very strategic way to go in and identify the exact items that need to be repaired and how to repair them. And let me back this up. It's not even repairing them. It's just moving neural pathways in the brain. The ones that are no longer needed. Like, it gets you where you want to go, but it's just a smattering, if that makes sense. So healing, there's nothing really broken. What it is just rewriting your character sheet, and then also feeding the brain right so you can move the markers and your body starts reacting on its own to the program you put in it that aligns with the character reel. When you look at it mechanically, it's like, oh, there's really no healing like to be done whatsoever. It's just helping the brain mature in a new environment. Okay, let's say this. You have a thorn bush in an environment and it needs those thorn bushes. And I'm not saying a thorn bush can change. I don't know. Haven't been here that long. So you take it and then you put it in an environment where it does not need those thorns anymore. Well, it's going to not operate very well in there because what if there's an animal or a species that it would do super well with there, but it's just always like, I'm going to try to barb anything or anybody that comes near me. Well, it needs, if it could think, it'd be like, okay, listen, get rid of the barbs and change the way you conduct yourself in this environment. It's not changing who you are. It's just changing how you are viewing the world and how you are operating, and not operating off of an old reel or an old script that is not conducive of this environment whatsoever. I hope that made some sense. And that's trying to look at it like really anally, tactily, very tactically, and breaking it down where it's receivable of, okay, like this isn't mumbo jumbo, it's actual, a legitimate, like looking at the way the machine operates with the operating system, because it's nothing like we have built whatsoever. It's totally different, but it is just as applicable, and it's far more effective than what we've made, because we make computer boards that have little electrical signals that are sent all over it. Our brain is the computer board, and there's signals being sent all over it. It's the same like the same thing. I need to edit some of those words. I'm done.